Can you learn Go in 20 minutes? In this video I teach you as much as I can, so let's not waste any time and get started. We will start with variables, and there are two ways to declare a variable in Go. The first way is using the var keyword. You name the variable and specify the type. So here we have a product variable that is of type string with the value coffee mug. The second way to declare a variable is to use the shorthand. So you write colon and then equal. And this will declare a variable that will infer its type from the value. So here we create a variable called stock and we set it to be of value 3. And by doing that, Go will set its type to be of int. And most of the time you will use the shorthand syntax. But there are some situations when you want to use the var instead. When you want to have a variable that has no value yet, then you should use var. When you want to have a type other than the one Go would infer it to. When you want to create a variable at package level, because at package level the shorthand syntax is not allowed. One thing to be aware about in Go is when you create variables without giving it a value, Go will give it a 0 value instead. So what does that mean? Here we have 3 variables, count, done, label. So count is set to an int, and if we don't give it a value, Go will set it to be 0. For booleans, Go will set it to be false, and for strings, it will be an empty string. You also have constant in Go. So to create a constant variable, for example, you can say const pi equal and then its value. And that means later we cannot change this value. And to print the value, you can use the FMT package. The FMT package is included in the standard library. That means it's included in every Go installation. So to use it, you will say import FMT, and then to print it, you can say FMT print line. And then here we say in stock, and we pass the stock variable. Next up is conditionals. Here we have if, else if, and else. And they work the same as in other languages. So here we check the value of stock, and depending on what value it is, we set the status variable. 0 is sold out, under 5 is low stock, and anything else is in stock. One difference from other languages is there is no parentheses around the condition. Another thing you can do in Go is that you can create a variable in the statement. Here we are creating a variable called left, and it's the difference between stock and sold. And if left is less than 0, we go into the if statement and we will print oversold by and the amount of left. So this variable will only live inside the if statement, and it can be a nice way to have a temporary value just in that if statement. Another way to do conditionals in Go is to use the switch statement. Here we are checking the value of day, and if day is Saturday or Sunday, we will assign kind to be weekend, else we default to weekday. And you can have as many cases you want in a switch statement, and a case can also match on multiple values like we do here, Saturday and Sunday. In some other languages, if you don't use the break keyword after the success, it will fall through to other cases. In Go, you don't need to do that, so switch statement looks very clean. Let's move on to functions. So you create the function in Go using the func keyword, and then you specify the name of the function. And then you have the parameters and the type of the parameter. And after the parenthesis, we have the return type. So in this case, it's an int. And one thing that is different from other languages is if 2 parameters next to each other are the same type, you only have to write that type once. And another thing in Go is that function can return multiple values at once. So here we have a function called 2 minutes, and you pass it the number of seconds, and the first value it returns is the minutes, and as the second return value it returns the seconds that is left from the minutes. So in this case we pass 135 seconds, and the first value we get back is 2 minutes, and the second value is 15 seconds. And you might be wondering, why is it useful to return 2 values? And we will get back to this later. It's very useful when handling errors in Go. Another thing when you're using functions in Go And for this example, we are reading a file and then we say defer close. So it's used for cleaning up resources. So we're opening a file, and then once we are done with this function, we want to close it, so no resources are taking up. When you say defer close right after you read the file, it doesn't matter where the function ends or where it will return. The defer will be the last thing that is called. So it basically you say close this file whenever we are done in this function. We already saw that functions can return multiple values. One common use case for this is to handle errors. A common pattern is that you return a value and the second thing you return is an error. If it's nil, that means there are no errors. So here we have a divide function. We check if 0 is passed as an argument, and if that is the case, we return 0 and then we return an error. Else, we return the value and we return nil as the error. And if you're coming from another language that use exceptions, this can be a quite big shift. So Go doesn't throw errors. In Go, you return errors and it's up to the caller to handle the errors. So here we can see we're calling the divide function and we check if it returns an error. And if it returns an error, we handle it. And it's more typing than using something like try and catch, but that's also the point. Errors as plain values make you handle failure right where it happens. Let's move on to loops. Go has one keyword to manage loops, and that is for. So here we see 3 examples of loops. So the first one is the classical counting loop, and then we have a while style loop, and the last example, it's an infinity loop that runs until breaking. So we can see here there are multiple loop patterns, but we are just using the for keyword. And with the for loop, you can also pair it with range. And you can use range when you want to loop over integers and collections. So here we have a loop that loops from 0 to 9. And then we check for even numbers. If it's even, we continue. And then we also check if I is bigger than 7. In that case, we use the break. So loop has continue and break, and it works the same as in other languages. Next, we will move on to collections. So we have arrays, slices, and maps. Let's start with arrays. So an array is a fixed length list of one type, and the index starts from 0. Here we have a color array that has 3 values. Then we replace the first value in the array with 200, and after that we print the length of the array using the len keyword. Once you have created an array, you cannot change the size of it and you cannot change the type of it. All you can do is replace the current values inside the array, but you cannot remove any value or add a value. And to loop over array, you can use a for loop with the range keyword. So here we loop over color and we will print the index with the value. And one thing to be aware of that is different from many other programming languages, that is array is a value and not a reference. So here we have an example. In A we create an array and then we set B to be equal to A. Then we change the first element of the B and set that to be 99. If we then print out array A, it will still have the same values as before. Most of the time you will not use arrays that much, only for specific use cases. For example, the color example is pretty good because there will only be red, green and blue value, but most of the time we want something dynamic. And to achieve that, we will use slices in Go. So a slice in Go is a dynamic list. You can shrink and you can grow it, but under the hood, slices are using arrays. And to create a slice in Go, you write it the same way as an array, except you don't specify the size. So here we have an item slice that contains mug and shirt, and then we add an item to the end of the slice by using the append method. And one thing to be aware of slices is they don't hold the data itself. It's a small header with 3 parts. Pointer to an array property, how many items it holds right now, and the capacity property, how many items can you add to the slice until the backing array has to be resized. When using append, you always have to assign it somewhere. So in this case, we assign it to items again. And because slices are passed by value, and when using append, if there is no capacity left, that means it needs to create a new array to be able to fit all the items. The old slice would then be pointing at the old array, so your changes would get lost. So append will always return the new slice. And to loop over a slice, you do the same as you do on an array, so you use the for loop with the range keyword. If you don't want the index, you can just discard it with underscore. And when you loop over a slice and you want to modify an item, so here we try to multiple price with 0.9. However, this won't work because the value that range give back is a copy. If you actually want to mutate the element in that slice, you have to use the index and update it that way. Then we have map. So with a map, you look up the value by a key instead of an index. So here we have a stock map. We can then use the product name to get back how much we have in stock of that product. So for example, here we set it to be a map that contains the key mug with the value 12. And later we add shirt that has the value 30. Then we loop over the map and we print the key and the value for each item. But one thing to be aware of is that map has no defined order. So when you use range on it, you can get back the result in a different order. And when you want to look up a value in a map, no matter how many keys there are in the map, most of the time, the speed of the lookup will be constant. And then we have custom data types. So Go has no classes, but it has something called struct. And here we have a rectangle struct. And you declare it by writing type, and then the name of the struct. And then you write the keyword struct, and then you set the property. So we have a width and a height of float 64. We initialize a rectangle and set the width and the height, and then we change the width to be 5. And you can also create a struct without setting the values for the properties. And what will happen then is all the properties will get their 0 value based on what type they are. And same with classes. Structs can have methods, but one unique thing compared to other languages is the method live outside and not inside the struct. So here we can see we have created an area method, and then in front of the name we have something what is called a receiver, and that is the rectangle. That tells Go this is a method that belongs to the rectangle struct. And to call the method, we use the name of our variable that is set to a struct. So in this case we could say r.area, and because we attach this method to the rectangle struct, we get access to all its property. So here we are returning the width and the height. But one thing to be aware of is this receiver is a copy. So that means with current implementation, we can only read the properties. We cannot actually change them. And to be able to do that, you will put a star in front of the receiver. And this is what is called a pointer receiver. And the difference is we are now pointing to the real value and not a copy. So in this scale method, we update width and we update height, and that would modify the properties. And if you did this without the star in front of the receiver, those changes would get lost. And in Go there is no inheritance. Instead it's using composition. And what that means is you can embed one struct into another one. So here we have a shape struct, and then we also have the rectangle struct, and we embed the shape struct into the rectangle. And by doing this, when we're working with the rectangle, we get access to all the methods and properties that the shape has. And when we embed it, so we can see in the rectangle, we just specify the name of the shape we want to embed. And then on the rectangle, we can reach for the properties as any other properties. So the shape has a name property, and if we want to use it in the rectangle, we just write name. And the same is true with the method. Here we're calling the describe method that belongs to the shape. And I think this is one thing Go does very well. So compared to languages that uses classes, if it would use inheritance, you would be stuck with everything that the parent class gives you. But with composition, you can build things from small pieces and swap them out instead, making it much more flexible. Then we have interfaces. So an interface, you can kind of see it as a contract or a requirement. To fulfill this requirement, you need these methods. Here we have a notifier interface, and it has a send method that takes a message and that can return an error. One difference in Go and between many other languages is in many other languages, when you want a type to use the interface, you have to write something like implement that interface. However, in Go, as long as a type has the methods that the interface specify, then it automatically satisfies that interface. So here we have an email struct. It has a send method. Then we have a SMS struct. It also have a send. And email and SMS never mention the notifier interface, but both satisfy it. And we can see here we have a notify function, and it takes a type of notifier, and here we pass email and SMS. And because email and SMS has a send method, they satisfy the notifier interface requirement. Goroutines and channels. And this is probably what Go is most famous for. A goroutine is just a function running on its own alongside the rest of your program instead of blocking it. How it works is you start by putting Go in front of a function call. So here we have a function send confirmation, and then in the main function we declare a variable. We say go send confirmation, we pass the order, and then we print order confirm. So when we say go send confirmation, it starts a Go routine and the main function moves on with the rest of the work. So a Go routine is very lightweight and not heavyweight as threads. But in this example there is a bug. Main function doesn't wait for the send confirmation to finish, and to be able to hand the result back and wait for the result, you can use a channel. So you can think of a channel as a pipe between Go routines where you can share messages. So here is the same example again. We have the send confirmation, but this time we added a time.sleep to demonstrate a slow network call. And then in top of the main function we create our channel, because the Go keyword only works on functions. So here we create an anonymous function. We say go func, and then inside we call send confirmation, and then we have an arrow to reply. That is our channel. So what this syntax means is whatever value that comes back from send confirmation, we will put that in the reply channel. And by doing that, we can later use it in our code. So if we then move on in the main function, we will then print order placed. And the last thing in the main function is we have a receiver expression. So here we're using the channel operator again, but now we are using it in the other direction. So what that means is we are saying wait for a reply to get a value, and when it get a value, then print it out. And if you want to handle multiple Go routines at the same time, you could use something called WaitGroup. So here we have a slice of orders, and we loop through all the orders and create a Go routine. Inside the loop, for every order, we launch a Go routine and do a send confirmation for each order. Now we want to be able to wait until all these confirmations are finished. So we can use the wait method from the wait group, and all of them are done. We then print the result. And if you want to wait for messages on multiple channels, you can use a select for that. So here we have a channel for email and a channel for SMS. What we're doing here, we are waiting for either the email channel or the SMS channel to get a value, and based on which channel gets it, we then print that value. And then we have a timeout case. In case we haven't received a value for email in 2 seconds, then we just print out timeout, so we don't block forever. And the last topic I will cover is generics. So imagine you have a max function that will return the biggest number. Now you want this to be able to work on ints, and you also want it to be able to work on floats. If you didn't have generics, you need to write 2 separate functions, even if the logic is the same. So t here in this example is a type parameter. Here we are saying we can either pass int or float 64. So if we pass an int here, t will become an int for the arguments, And then for the return type, t will become the type you passed. This was everything for this video. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. See you in the next one.